2018 was the greatest year for Spider-Man fans. Not only did we see Spidey team up with the Avengers and Insomniac's new and fresh take with Peter, we got to see Miles Morales in a brand new and astounding way. Unfortunately, we also lost Stan Lee that year. But I think Stan would have at least been happy to know that the year he went out saw not one, but two brilliant creative teams breathe new life into his most iconic character. Maybe more actually. I've heard really good things about the comics lately. Though I haven't had a chance to actually read them, I did have a chance to see Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse back then in theaters though. And for the second time after rewatching it recently, I found myself thinking, damn, that might just be the best Spider-Man thing ever. I'm gonna have to get a little bit spoilery to talk about why, so if you haven't seen it yet for some reason, the long and short of this is that Into the Spider-Verse is the best written, best directed Spider-Man film to date. It's also one of the most imaginative, animated films ever produced. An absolute treat for the senses with a killer soundtrack to match its gorgeous visuals. This is a movie that was worth seeing in theaters and 3D if you could. So get out there, watch it in whatever means possible, then come back and watch this video. It is an easy platinum medal recommendation for me. Now I myself, as well as many others, think that Insomniac's Spider-Man represents the definitive incarnation of Peter Parker and his rogues gallery, and I still stand by that. I've never seen anything execute better on the concept of Spider-Man as Stan Lee envisioned him. A relatable, painfully human character struggling to balance his life with his duties and live up to the responsibilities thrust on him by the world. Into the Spider-Verse does a great job of exploring Peter Parker and Miles' characters in that light. Probably the best in film. But it just doesn't have the runtime it needs to really dig into their human sides the way that the game does. But in 2018, Spider-Man is a lot more than that one concept. He's an icon, a legacy. Hell, I feel suspect saying he in this sentence because the Spider mantle has been taken up by so many different kinds of people and one pig across countless different dimensions and adaptations. Spider-Man has been the subject of 9 feature films, over a dozen TV shows, 50 plus video games, thousands of comic book issues, and countless internet memes. He's had multiple breakfast cereals for Pete's sake. Spider-Man represents an ideal of heroism that kids around the world still aspire to. Spider-Man represents a media franchise so sprawling and prolific that it could be called an empire on its own, apart from the Marvel Universe. Spider-Man represents that feeling when everyone is riding some trend and you're just sitting there doing nothing. And Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse somehow manages to represent all of that in a 2-hour runtime. And perhaps I shouldn't be surprised by that, considering that Phil Lord, as part of a screenwriting duo with this film's producer Chris Miller, previously managed to encapsulate everything that LEGO means to everyone, collectible, merchandise, kids' imaginative toy, into one movie. But this is an order of magnitude more impressive than that to me, because while Spider-Verse pays fitting tribute to just about the entirety of Spider-Man's legacy, it also manages to tell a complete, uncompromising, and compellingly personal origin story for Peter Parker's successor, Miles Morales. One with a bold musical and visual identity distinct from any prior exploration of the Spider-Man mythos to date. This is very much its own thing, but it is also everything that Spider-Man has ever been all at once. The quips, the drama, the products shilling, the memes, the emo dance from Spider-Man 3. That's literally part of Peter Parker's backstory. It's an incredible cinematic achievement that I still can't fully wrap my head around, and it is so damn fun. That's not all it is, not by a long shot, but it feels like as good a place as any to start talking about it because the first thing that jumps out to you about Spider-Verse will almost certainly be its art style. Lord and Miller wanted to create a film that felt like you walked inside a comic book and spent over a year developing the art style before they could create just 10 seconds of footage that they were happy with. As a wise man once said, "Give me 3 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 2 sharpening my axe." That's a line straight out of the film and a philosophy that has paid off handsomely for it. Combining hand-drawn 2D line art with 3D models in a manner similar to Pixar's Paperman short, the film has a fluid style to it that accommodates the existence of an anime heroine and her mecha, standing alongside a classic cartoon-style talking pig, a black and white noir crime fighter, and a Spider-Gwen taken out of her comics without any of it looking jarring. This comic style is sold in big ways, like with speech bubbles, sound effects, and action lines, as well as with a lot of tiny details like screen tones and the shadows, and a color bleeding, depth of field effect achieved by offsetting the red and blue values of various objects in the foreground and background. You could pause this film on just about any frame and it would look like a stunning comic spread, but if you did, you'd be missing out on how it moves. The animation doesn't flow at a consistent frame rate. Instead, characters sort of pop between dynamic poses, with the action lines serving to smooth the motion the way that a CGI film would use motion blur or a traditional animated work would use smearing. This stuttery style of animation can be a little bit disorienting when you first start watching the film in 3D, but once you get used to it, it's definitely worth the initial headache. Especially once you see the world start to break and shift into different art styles as dimensions start folding in on themselves. It is gorgeous and trippy as hell. Now obviously comic book come to life isn't quite a style in itself. The medium encompasses as many distinct art styles as you can imagine. So the look of Spider-Verse's main world isn't entirely defined by that one nebulous concept. It has to stand out just as much as the anime mecha and cartoon characters who come to visit it. And the universe that Miles inhabits has a certain graffiti edge to it that fits perfectly with his character as an aspiring graffiti artist, and that graffiti style really expresses itself in how he makes his version of the iconic costume, which is one hell of a satisfying payoff moment for the movie. You could even make the argument that this style is interpretive as though it's specifically representative of how Miles views the world around him, colored by the culture that he was immersed in as a black kid growing up in Brooklyn. And if that was what they were going for, it certainly carries through in the film's use of its incredible soundtrack. Spider-Verse isn't scored like your typical Hollywood blockbuster or your typical animated kids film for that matter. It has an original soundtrack composed by some of hip-hop's biggest stars such as Post Malone, Ty Dolla $ign, as well as the late Juice WRLD and XXXTentacion. I really appreciate great jams when I hear them, and it's not just that the music is good, it also plays an integral role in the action and story of the film. The visuals are very much driven by the rhythm of the music, and the dialogue and the background noise of the film often gets sampled and remixed into the tracks, blurring the lines of Spider-Verse's soundscape and narrative. It's almost like the whole film is one trippy music video, not unlike Tron Legacy or Baby Driver, and given the poster for the parallel world sequel to Shaun of the Dead that pops up in Spider-Verse's Times Square, gosh I wish that was real, I think it's safe to assume that Lord and Rotham were drawing at least a little inspiration from Edgar Wright when they took the film in this direction. And I think that its editing style and sense of visual comedy also owe a lot to Wright's work. The character designs are delightfully abstract and animate in a very expressive, exaggerated way that makes both the slower character interactions and the bombastic action scenes equally fun to watch. It also can't have been easy to write the characters in that way. The heart of the film is most certainly the interactions between its various spider people, especially Miles, Gwen, and Peter, who each undergo their own arcs and deal with their own personal hardships and hang-ups. Gwen, coping with the loss of her Earth's Peter Parker, refuses to open up to other people or make friends, while Peter has fallen into a kind of pathetic, depressive rut after losing Mary Jane because he was scared of having kids. Both of them end up mentoring Miles, helping him to cope with his own losses and pushing him to be the hero that he needs to be. Though, I'll talk more about his arc later. He in turn pushes Gwen to open up and make friends again, with the potential for them to become something a little more. And thank goodness we're getting a 2-part sequel next year, as well as the following year. And he helps Peter to realize that he might be ready for kids after all. John Mulaney as Peter Porker, aka Spider-Ham, and Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir provide most of the comic relief. Which is not to say that the other Spider-Folk aren't funny. The schlubby Peter is especially endearing, and Penny Parker, pilot of the Spider-Mech, has some really funny moments as well. It's just that those two absolutely kill it. Mulaney's voice and delivery is pitch perfect for a hammy, slapstick cartoon hero, and Cage takes the hard-boiled persona that he honed playing Kick-Ass's Big Daddy up to 11. The funniest part of the movie for me, aside from the end credits scene, which had the whole theater dying, was definitely watching Noir very seriously trying to comprehend a Rubik's Cube, despite having come from a world where color doesn't exist in general. The film has a lot of fun with its parallel universe gimmick, especially when it comes to its pop culture references. They work in a Coca-Cola product placement in Times Square, only to replace it with the parallel world rebranding. Also the Yugo, a very real, very mediocre Yugoslavian economy car from the 80s that importers tried and failed to sell in the US, was a big smash in this universe apparently. As was Lord and Miller's first show Clone High, which apparently has a movie opening in June here. So Miles Morales gets to be Spider-Man and see Clone College. I've never been more jealous of a cartoon character in my entire life. But that's neither here nor there. Whenever I see Phil Lord's name on a script, I expect the humor to be sharp, and Spider-Verse blew my expectations away. That said, it's not all fun and games. And much as I love the heroes, it's the villains' designs that are the highlight of this movie's aesthetic for me. The film needs a lot of villains on hand to oppose the 6 spider people trying to save the world, and thankfully avoids the standard Sinister Six lineup in favor of putting a unique spin on some classic Spider baddies. Every villain cuts an intimidating figure, especially the hulking Kingpin, who looks a little goofy in theory, but in practice, absolutely dominates every frame he's in. The Green Goblin has a positively demonic form inspired by the Ultimate Comics line that Miles originally came from. Scorpion has a really cool Latin American, cyborg-like design that's one of my favorite interpretations of the character to date. And the film smartly avoids competing with Alfred Molina and William Salyers with its own unique take on Doc Ock that I absolutely love and that I found to be a really pleasant surprise since they kept it out of all the marketing material. So even if you're watching this expecting spoilers, I won't spoil that part. The only villain who's not particularly striking is Tombstone, who doesn't really do much and kind of just looks like a grey thug in a suit. But every other bad guy is bursting with very memorable personality, and for a film of this length, 5 out of 6 villains really isn't bad, especially considering that every other Spider-Man film has fallen flat when it tries to go over too. I think it helps that Spider-Verse works from the assumption that just like you already know Peter Parker's backstory, you're at least passingly familiar with most of these villains by now, and it doesn't need to spend too much time trying to establish who they are or flesh them out and make them sympathetic. Like I said, the heart of the film really lies in the heroes, and the villains play second fiddle to that, with Kingpin only have a marginally understandable motivation for doing what he does. Well, there is one notable exception: the Prowler's secret identity of Aaron Davis, Miles Morales' uncle, who unsurprisingly plays a pivotal role in his development as a hero, by dying, as uncles of Spider-Man so often tend to do in a pretty sad and damn heart-wrenching scene. And as is Spider-Man tradition, that death teaches Miles a valuable lesson, though not quite the same one that Peter Parker had to learn. Unlike Peter with his Uncle Ben, Miles has more than one father figure to look up to, where Miles' dad, Jefferson, is a straight-laced, upstanding officer of the law, and therefore pretty lame in his teenage son's eyes. Aaron is a free-spirited, cool uncle. Jefferson wants his son to live up to his full potential, but he has a very rigid and fixed idea of how he should do that. Aaron encourages him to express himself and be his own person, but he's also prone to shirking his responsibilities, and he's a hitman for a deranged mob boss. So, maybe he could do it with a slightly more rigid moral compass. Miles loves and respects both of them, but neither represents everything that he wants to be or the best path to being who he could be. And the one person who kind of does, well, seems way out of reach. What with the whole wall climbing and swinging from tall buildings thing that he has going on? For basically the entire span of his memory, Miles has grown up in a New York protected by Spider-Man. He looks up to him. He dreams of being him. And Peter Parker's heroics have shaped who he wants to be just as much as either of the father figures in his life. Miles is basically a surrogate for the Spider fans in the audience, dreaming impossible dreams of being a hero while trying to deal with the more grounded expectations of his family, and trying to find some other way to be who he wants to be. But even when Miles gains spider powers of his own, and that dream is thrust into his grasp, the idea of really being a hero like Spider-Man scares him. He's not sure that he has it in him, so he runs away. He refuses to really confront any of the problems facing him, or accept the responsibility that's been foisted on him and the expectations that people have of him, even though he knows he should. And he keeps running from his school, from his universe's Peter, leaving him to die. He expects pudgy Peter, Gwen, and the other spider people to hold his hand and protect him when things get hairy, and he refuses to confront his uncle when he finds out the truth about him. Instead, he runs off into the night, a decision that leads the villains right to Aunt May's house and ultimately gets Uncle Aaron killed when Miles is forced to confront him in front of the Kingpin. The lesson that Miles has to learn from his uncle's death isn't quite that he needs to take responsibility, but rather that he needs to believe in himself. Stop worrying about what he can do and just do what he should do. Take a leap of faith. It's not the lack of spider powers holding him back from being a hero, but the lack of willingness to throw himself into the deep end and try. A lack of willingness to believe that he can, as the film spells out with a beautiful quote from Stan Lee in the end credits. You don't need to be able to climb walls or turn invisible or swing around in the air to be a superhero. You just need to help other people when they need help. Do the right thing when the right thing needs to be done. Anyone can wear that mask, metaphorically speaking, and be a hero like Spider-Man if they really want. And with the world in the messy state that it's in right now, I think that's a really important message for this film to send to its audience. To those hundreds of thousands of people who grew up and are growing up wanting to be Spider-Man, you can be and you should. Like I said, this movie is about everything that Spider-Man is. It's about what makes us laugh in Spider-Man. It's about what makes us cry in Spider-Man. It's about the kind of people that Spider-Man makes us want to be. It's about the cultural impact that Spider-Man has had on the world at large in every sense of that word. It's about the products and merch that Spider-Man shamelessly tries to sell us to. Hell, for most of the movie, Miles is running around in a store-bought, licensed Halloween costume. Because as he did with the Lego movie, Phil Lord doesn't really try to deny or shy away from the commercial aspects of this franchise, even when he's talking about how it can inspire people to be better. Pretty much every single person who likes Spider-Man for any reason, the comics, the cartoons, the movies, the merch, the games, or even the reaction images, needs to see this movie because I can all but guarantee that you will find at least one thing in it that really speaks to you. Speaking for me, I don't know whether this or the Spider-Man game is better. I don't even know if I can make a meaningful comparison. They're such different things, and they both do what they're trying to do more or less perfectly. One's a spectacular Peter Parker story, and the other is the ultimate Miles Morales origin. What's important is that they both make me as a Spider-Man fanboy happier than any other piece of media with the webhead's face on it ever has, and considering that I consume most of that media as an easily impressed, starry-eyed child. I think that speaks volumes. I mean, I'm just an easily impressed, starry-eyed man-child now, but still, you get my point. I don't quite know how to end this video. I don't really want it to end, and I really hope that both of these Spider-Man series are just getting into the swing of things because I want them to both give me more, which I'm hopeful and excited for since we're getting sequels to both. So I guess I'll leave it to you guys. What do you think of this movie? What was your favorite part? Your favorite song, your favorite villain and hero? This movie gave me so much to gush about, and now I really want to see all of you do the same. While you're down there, I'd appreciate it if you whip your webs at the subscribe and like buttons if you feel like it, of course. And maybe check out my other video essays if you're interested. But as always, I'm Joseph A. Ramos, stay safe, and see you in the next video.